There's this awesome story that Chuck Colson tells. Some of you are familiar with him from Prison Fellowship Ministry. Chuck Colson tells the story of Humaita prison. It's a prison in Brazil. In his travels with Prison Fellowship, he traveled to São José dos Campos, Brazil. I'm probably not saying that correctly. And in Brazil, there's this prison. It's still around today. It's called Humaita Prison. It's actually part of Prison Fellowship today. But it's infamous prison where inmates were actually tortured by guards. There was an isolation cell, and they tortured these inmates. Some of them were killed. Violence among the prisoners was out of control, and the living conditions deteriorated so badly and so much that finally the government in Brazil was ready to shut down the prison. And so what happened is there were these two Christians who stepped up and said, if you're going to shut it down anyway, can we take over? Will you let us take over this prison? And so in kind of a rare move, the Brazilian government gave these two Christians control of this prison, and they completely turned it around. They were the only two full-time employees, two paid employees for this prison. All the rest of the work started getting done by the inmates themselves. So Chuck Colson travels to Brazil, and he tells the story of visiting this very infamous prison, and he walks in and he describes seeing clean living quarters and the men living at peace with one another, and like biblical sayings written on the walls. You can't even believe this is the place he's heard about. And his guide through this prison was one of the inmates. And so as the inmate's walking him around and showing him everything, he takes him down this long hallway toward this isolation cell where all these prisoners had been tortured by guards. And he says to Colson as he's leading him down this hallway, he says, we only have one prisoner that we keep in that cell now. And then he turns to Colson and he says, are you sure you want to go in there? I mean, everything, look at this place, it's awesome. Are you sure you want to go in there? And Colson assures him, he says, listen, I've been in isolation cells all over the world. I've been with the worst of the worst criminals, the darkest of the dark. Yes, I want to go in there. So this inmate kind of shrugs his shoulders like, okay. And so he turns the key in the lock, opens the door, and as Colson tells the story, he walks into this isolation cell, and there's nothing in the room except a crucifix on the wall, hand carved by the prisoners, with the prisoner Jesus hanging on the cross. See, the grace of Jesus, the gospel, has this way of creating an entirely new community, even in a prison, even during a pandemic, even during an election year. So maybe you're here today, maybe you're watching online and you're thinking to yourself, okay, but what about my secret addiction that I haven't told anybody about? I would say the ground is level at the foot of the cross. That's what I would say. Jesus' death on the cross was every bit as much for you as it was for me. There's no bragging rights. There's no fences. There's no one-upping. Well, wait a minute. What about all my money problems? I'm still kind of keeping it under control. Everything looks good. Nobody really knows about. What about my money problem? I would say the ground is level at the foot of the cross. Well, wait a minute. What about my secret same-sex attraction that I'm managing to sort of keep under wraps and keep under control? My spouse doesn't even know about it. I would say the ground is level at the foot of the cross.